All right. Let's begin. Can you begin by introducing yourself, your name, and your birthday?
Yeah. My name is Roula Alkatout, or pronounced the Arab way, Roula Alkatout, and my birthday is July 14th, 1990.
Great. Let's start off by having you tell me about yourself.
Yeah. Right now I work at a recycling nonprofit in Minneapolis, educating people about recycling and composting. Before that, I was a case manager. I interned and then AmeriCorps and then worked at a nonprofit for a total of 8 years. So I left that job about a year ago. And yeah, should I go into like family history or not yet?
Well, my next question
I like biking.
Cool. My next question, I guess, is to tell me about your family.
Yeah. So my family came to the States in 1990, where they left Kuwait because of the Gulf War invasion. So they were given the opportunity. Really, it was luck and just chance. So when the Gulf War invasion was happening, the only reason why my family got the option to come to the States got the option to leave Kuwait, we didn't know that it would be to the States, was because one of my brothers was born in Florida. My parents had him, so he's a U.S. citizen. So it was a U.S. citizen in a war zone. So I think we got on the last plane leaving Kuwait before no more people could leave. My parents had 24 hours to decide what to do. So they were given, I don't know, by the government, been notified, like, you can leave, but you have to decide within 24 hours. And I think, sadly, that wasn't like a new thing necessarily for my parents to have to do, except for they had 4 kids, whereas they've escaped war multiple times in their lives. Like, collectively, it's been 4 times between the 2 of them where they've had to leave their home because of war or because of, like, safety. So they decided to leave, and they also, within those 24 hours, had to pack everything that they could. So they left everything thinking maybe that they would come back. I don't know if they thought it was like a permanent forever thing, but it was. We couldn't go back, and we ended up, so the first flight was to London, and then the flight was to North Carolina. And right now still there's a lot of immigrants in North Carolina from when that was happening. The only reason why we ended up in Minnesota is that my dad went to school, I think he went to college with somebody who worked here. My dad connected with him, and the person said, listen, like, we will, like, come here and I'll, like, help you out. And so we came here, and we have not left. So that's like a major part of, like, how my life has been shaped. But I can get into a little bit of history with my dad leaving. So we're Palestinian, and my dad was 7 or 8 when the occupation was happening in Palestine, and was forced out, and I think it was 49 when his family had to leave. So he has memory of, like, being forced out. So when I said, like, this wasn't his first time experiencing this, it's because in Palestine they had everything taken away, forced out, and ended up in Syria. And my mom has memory of just war. And I don't want to say that, like, it's all terrible and war is, like, it's not like there wasn't joy, but there's so much war that has shaped my parents and led us here. So my dad's experience in addition to just like our story of immigration or immigrating here, and like being refugees, but like we came here because my brother's a citizen and like this weird like refugee immigrant status, but then not having like a country of origin because we're Palestinian, was weird.
Yeah.
It still is kind of weird. So anyway, my dad ended up in Kuwait because of school and work, and my mom moved to Kuwait with her family when she was younger, and they met there. And when we came to the States, it was 1990, so I was a baby. Like,
right.
I didn't know any of this. So we got to the States, and my dad was a pharmacist, and he couldn't practice because I know that he took the exam maybe twice here to be able to practice here, but I don't know if it was a language barrier. I don't know if it was like not being able to like continue leaving to take the test. I don't know. For some reason I have in my mind that he had to go to Chicago to take this exam, but that could be just something I have mixed up. But regardless, he couldn't become a pharmacist here, even though he had years of school. He was a practicing pharmacist, so that's just like another thing that they had to leave behind, you know, like a piece of your identity, like all of your identity, you know, what you worked for. So we were really lucky where we met people who, I don't know how we met them, but they were involved in our lives forever. Like, the woman who was like helped us with like getting coats and like pots and pans and like getting us settled and like putting my brothers into Title I classes to make sure that they were able to like have assistance with learning English and reading English. Like there were those people there. Like we had such a lucky situation because like we had connection, and then I don't know how we met this family, but we had like support forever. Like we've always been surrounded by really supportive people. And it was important back then because it's like my parents' world got turned upside down. They had 4 kids under, like, I don't know, probably under 15, and one was an infant, which was me. And it's like you're in this entirely new world unexpectedly. So we got a lot of support from people, like when we came. So we lived in an apartment, and my parents both worked pretty like odd jobs, factory work, and my dad owned a corner store in St. Paul called Craig's Country Boy, and his name, people used to call him Ernie, and his name is Auni, and that always, we still laugh about it today, how people would call him Ernie. You know, it's like classic. And I don't even know if he would like tell them that wasn't his name. He's just like, okay, this is what it is. Yeah. And eventually, my mom got a position as a teacher. Right now she's a special ed para, but back then she had like various roles in paraprofessional, like as a paraprofessional, and my brothers and I mean, we like assimilated, and I guess I'll only speak for myself, but I think growing up, we grew up in Anoka, which is like pretty white, pretty Christian more than, I mean, I would say Christian and then white. It's like, you know where people's values are. So yeah, I'm just like, can I go into like growing up in Anoka?
Yeah, please.
Being a Muslim?
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
That's the next
should
question.
I reel it in? Okay,
No,
great.
no. You're right on track.
I went to school, and I did not know of really any other Muslims except for like 1 or 2 families, but was never really connected with them just for whatever reason. But I think, like, as I was older, I realized all of the, like, terrible things that I experienced, but I didn't even realize were terrible just because there was nothing to, like, show me a red flag, I guess. So, yeah, I really tried, and this is, like, something I regret so much, is, like, I, like, lost the language so fast. I spoke Arabic, like, I mean, my parents still speak it. My dad almost exclusively speaks in Arabic. My mom, I mean, they're both still fluent. My older brothers are, like they can talk and, like, understand, and I lost a lot of it. And it really was, like, I'm just trying to fit in. I'm just trying to, like, survive in Anoka, like, where you know that you're different. There are different, like, you just know you're different. So I think I just tried super hard to, like, blend in. Not that I ever denied that I was Muslim, ever. But it was just, like, you just try to get by and, like, to have as much of a normal life because you've had these, like, or your parents have had these traumatic experiences, and, like, your siblings remember things of war. So, yeah, it's just, like, it's just so hard to find this spot to be content with both these lives, like, when you're young and, you know, you're, like, family's trying to, like, keep this, like, keep the language alive, keep the culture alive, but at the same time you're, like, going to school and you're trying to just, like, be like other people and just, like, be normal, but normal it shouldn't have been that I needed to sacrifice one thing for the other. That was, I mean, maybe it's because of the time that we were, like, my age of, like, oh, like, in the 90s or in the early 2000s, like, that's just the way it was. People weren't as, like, open or, like, willing to hear you out. And I would say that it's still a problem. Like, I mean, of course it's still a problem, but just looking back at it, like, all I wanted was to just, like, have a normal life. And not to say my parents didn't provide, because I think 5 years after we came to the States, they bought a house.
Wow.
Like, they truly, like, hustled and, like, did everything they could to, like, never make us feel like we were, like, in a crisis. Like, they did everything they could to provide for their kids, and they did. I mean, they have 4 grown kids that are, like, healthy and have careers, and, like, it's truly, like, the ideal story of a family coming here.
Yeah.
But it is, like, we were lucky.
Yeah.
With who we knew. So I digress, but
yeah, cool. I want to ask you, what was the attitude towards religion in your house growing up?
It was, like, very there. Like, religion was important to my family. I remember we would do, like, Quranic studies with other Muslim families. All of my siblings and I at one point were in Sunday school for Islamic studies and for the language. I mean, still now my dad is, like, you know, reciting things from the Quran or, like, talking religion. But I mean, when I was younger, it was like, you hang on to that. That's, like, we're not in the Middle East. We're not in, like, this isn't where we're from. We're here, but we do have our religion, so we're going to, like, hold that and practice it and be proud of who we are and where we're from. And I'm really thankful for that. Like, I love being proud of my heritage and the religion and, like, where I come from. Being a Palestinian, even though I've never been, like, and I think that's to do with them of, like, no, you're gonna just, this is how it is, you know? Not that we're all, like, super religious or we all have our different, like, spectrums or, like, levels of belief or whatever, but yeah. You
do have different levels of belief with your family?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like...
Was it always like that?
I don't think so. I think when you grow up in general, you start to just like form your own ideas, or not ideas, but like you have more space to like think for yourself. And I think that now it's so much about, in my eyes, it's like keeping the culture alive. Like the practice of like celebrating Eid. That's like a tradition, and that's a very important thing to our family. So you take the day off, you go to prayer with your family, and then you have a super big meal, and you celebrate like the end of Ramadan. Like those things are so like embedded in my family, and like I think my mom especially is so good at like, we are going to engage your nieces and nephews. We're gonna like make this fun and make this like, you know, my nephew just the other day was like, I love Easter because of the Easter egg hunt. It's like, oh, because two of my brothers married white people that are from here, and like they converted, so they're raising their kids Muslim, but like they have family, like their family members are Christian, whatever. Sure. So I was like, wow, like how do we make Ramadan like engaging or whatever? So it's like, let's do like a lantern hunt or whatever. Yeah. So it's like, how do we keep it important? Like, how do we keep the tradition and the culture alive? Because you don't want it to be lost over time, because it's such a beautiful thing. Like, how do you keep young people engaged? Like, what do you teach them? What do you show them? What do you want them to carry with them that's positive to share with the world, to like stop looking at you in such a negative way? My mom hosted, my older brother has a couple of buddies that she hosted for the 4th of July, and she made this like super Palestinian meal, like our favorite meal. We had it like a barbecue outside, and it was super nice, and she had like American flag paper plates and napkins, and we were like, Mom, like, why are you like doing this? Like, why are you like being like this? And she said, like, I want people to know that we're just like them. And that was like, I understood her so much in that like moment of, we're just like you. We like the same things. We can celebrate the 4th of July. There's no difference. And what I take from it is like, these people who one couple who brought their kids, like they're going to like, their kids will remember us ideally. And instead of like listening to what people say on the news of like stereotypes of Arabs or Muslims, they like have a person to associate that like positive experience with, and say like, well, no, just because this person's Muslim doesn't mean they're bad. It doesn't mean that they're a terrorist, because some people really think that, and that's because their parents teach them, or the classroom teaches it, or whatever. So it's like, you keep your culture, and sometimes it's like not even the religion, but like the culture is so important, and it's a beautiful thing, and it like makes you want to like hold it tighter the more the negative things happen. Oddly, like it's a protective thing. Like,
makes sense.
Yeah, you just want to protect it because it was beautiful. Like you think of all these like family gatherings, and like the music and the laughter and the language and the people associated. It's like, it's beautiful, and you don't want to lose that, and you want people to know that you're just like them, just from a different place. So
then that's kind of like, you know, that's your parents keeping their culture alive in their home. And then as we like get more into the conversation about school and kind of bumping up against like, you know, American culture, how was school, what was the attitude towards school in your home, like with your parents?
I mean, it was like, you're going to school and you're going to do well. I think a lot of parents, but like think that way. They want their kids to do well. But for my parents, it was like, you're going to do well and you're going to go beyond, like, ideally, you're not going to stop at college. You're going to go beyond, like, you're going to go to grad school. You're going to be a doctor or a whatever. Like, it was school first above anything, because that was, like, the foundation of your life is going to be, like, your success in school is going to take you places. And I think there was no question about me going to college. And, like, knowing that my parents did whatever they could to be able to let me go to college and to be able to take, like, a financial burden off of me, because education is, like, everything. It really is everything. And especially to my dad, because he went through so much school, and he went to school in a time where you, like, had to hand draw your, like, plants that you're growing, like, I don't know, he's a pharmacist, so, like, the beautiful plants that you had to hand draw that you were studying, you didn't have a graph, or you didn't have a thing like a projector or whatever. Right. So it's like, to him, you go to school, you maybe run into issues with, like, ignorant people, and if they ever needed to intervene on something, they would, but they knew. I think especially after September 11th happened, they knew that, like, it wasn't always going to be easy for us, even more. But I can't ever remember a time where they just, like, brushed school aside or your education aside. It's just, it wasn't a question, and I'm so thankful for it. Like, I never just, like, missed school all the time. Thankfully, I had a mom who could drive me to school if I ever needed to, or I took the bus or whatever, but it was never a question that I was, like, not going to do well in school. It wasn't, like, a toxic environment at all, but it was like, no, like, I'm gonna go to school and I'm gonna, like, try hard and, like, have hiccups, but still, like, take it seriously.
Sounds like you're very supported in that endeavor as well.
Oh, totally. Nice. Absolutely.
And then, so in school, what were your friendships like? And, like, who did you associate with? What did you do for fun with your friends?
Yeah. I had a best friend who I hung out with all the time, and a few other friends where we would just, like, talk between classes all the time, and on weekends, I was not allowed to go to football games. That was, like, the big thing in Anoka, and probably everywhere in high school. But just because it's, like, not a normal thing, and, like, you don't go to, like, a football game. It's just not a thing back home, or, like, it's not a normal thing. And also, like, very, like, strict parents too, like, their only daughter doing random like, what's a football game? No, you're not going.
I mean, they have football, like soccer.
They have soccer, but it's also, like, with other Muslims, and, like, not with all these other variables that you can't control, or you have no idea what it's like. Like, my dad is older, so to him it's like, no, like, you're not doing that. You're not going to prom. Like, what is, no, like, absolutely not. So it was a lot of, like, I could not do a lot of what my friends did in high school because my dad was strict, and because it was just, like, it just simply wasn't a thing that you did. So
how was that?
Oh, it was terrible. It was awful. It was awful because I still don't understand. I don't think that that's, like, a good way to protect a kid. I think, luckily, I, like, stayed out of dangerous situations when I moved out, because I think a lot of people are like, okay, whatever. I'm like, fuck this. I'm going to do whatever I want to, and I'm just going to, like, be reckless. Thankfully, that didn't happen to me, but I think, like, it totally could have. It happens to people all the time. I don't think that's a healthy thing. I think they wanted me to be safe, and they wanted me to be healthy and have a safe home. But I also think, like, there comes a point where you have to like give a little and say, okay, we're not like, this isn't Kuwait, this isn't Syria, it's not Jordan. We have to like recognize that this is a norm. And just because you're doing this thing that maybe you never did, like a parent never did when they were younger, doesn't mean that your kid's gonna lose everything about culture just because they're going to like a football game.
Right.
But yeah, other than that, we would like, I mean, on weekends, like weekdays, or weekend days, my friends and I would just like do stupid stuff, like go to Best Buy, and they had those like new MacBook photo booth photos. We would do stupid stuff like that. There's not much to do in Anoka.
Yeah.
So just go to the Best Buy, go to Subway. Yeah, and like hanging out at people's houses. This friend, one of my best friends there from high school that I don't have any contact with anymore, because she was evangelical Christian, and like later realized like the intent a lot of times was like trying to get me to convert, which was like a very sad thing to realize.
In high school?
Yeah, in high school. And like would like weirdly say like super disrespectful things about my religion versus hers. So that was like a weird thing to just like have this friend for so long and then finally be like, oh, like she's kind of terrible to me. But that's again like when you get out of it and you're like, oh, that's not normal to like be told that your belief is bad. Like, because even though I'm Muslim, I am like, who am I to say anybody else is wrong for what they believe? But that's the type of person I am.
Right.
Like, doesn't matter to me what you believe or don't believe. It's like we're all in the playing fields, and like if you're a good person, that's great. Like we can coexist together. So yeah.
Did that come to a head in high school or after high school? You and her.
I think there was one time that has really stuck with me that I think is like shaped the way we just kind of drifted apart. It was on Eid, so after Ramadan had happened, like the most joyous, like exciting day. And I think we were talking on the phone because I didn't go to school that day because you get off of school because it's a celebration. Yeah. And she had said, I don't even know why it came up, but she had said, I just want you to know, like, I don't think what you're doing is right. Talking of like celebrating or like believing in the Prophet Muhammad. Or maybe, yeah, I don't know. Like she had said, like, I don't think what you're doing is right. And maybe even said that I like thought I was going to hell. That could be me fogging it with a teacher that didn't have a great conversation with, but regardless, that really like was so hurtful for someone to say that on like such a special day where I was always like super open to like hearing about her religion, and like even I don't even think my parents knew that I did this because they would probably back then would have like had a meltdown, but I would go to the like Christian group thing in high school where I'd be like, sure, I'll like go to this thing with you, but then later realizing like, what the hell, like, oh no, like this was just kind of all like a ploy. It was weird. After she had said that to me, it was really hurtful, and I kind of was just like, what, like, that's not how a friend should be. And I never thought that about her or the religion. I just never was like, you're wrong and you're a bad person for what you believe. And then after high school, she had gone to like a very Christian college. So I think after that was just like a natural, like, oh, I realized you really weren't a good friend. Like super funny. Her family was like really welcoming and lovely. But then they're like the negatives just outweighed the positives, just because I realized even if you're like young and you say dumb stuff, that was still like very hurtful, and like she knew what she was saying because it was like so specific to you know, you're wrong for what you believe, and that's sadly like what their church taught them, right? So
you talked earlier about like wanting to fit in when you were young. like younger, like I was imagining like elementary age. Did that carry through high school? Did you feel assimilated or whatever it was by the time you were in high school?
I did. People still knew that I was Muslim. Mostly, I mean, it was people that I had like known, you know, all throughout elementary or early middle school to high school. So people knew, but it was not something I like talked about all the time, not out of shame, but just to like make it through, to like not be othered, because I think it's super easy in high school to be othered if there's like anything different with you. And I had the idea of like, okay, like I can like do everything you all can, like I can talk about the same things, I can have similar experiences with you just because I have a family that has a different religion, or I believe in something else that's like outside of the norm, doesn't mean I have to be so different from you. And like I was craving that like acceptance. I don't think I ever got it. Or maybe I like from some people I did, but like from teachers, like there's an awful experience of like my teacher had joked about how there were a few comments that he made, but like one of them was, I think we were like joking about something and he was like, well, you're going to hell, but not, I said something about religion, but like was like, well, you're going to hell and I know what it's for. And I was like very like explicit, like, and it was like a joke quote, you know, like haha jokey, but like that was a very loaded joke. And like talking about that to somebody in college, I realized like, oh, that was like very racist, very inappropriate to say to a student. And like, even if you didn't mean it, I don't even think he didn't mean it, because why would you say that? And then another one was like somebody joked about, this makes me so sad, but joked about, like, said something about me being Muslim and then was like, bomb squad. And then like we like joked about it because I was like, okay, it's like a joke. But yeah, it's just terrible. So like you're trying really hard to assimilate and to just like be there, but you're also like hanging on to your religion. So like clearly it was like, I guess it was clear that I was Muslim and like that I was not shy about it. I probably wore a necklace that said God in Arabic. I'm sure I did because I wore it all the time, but it wasn't like, I didn't like talk about the religion all the time because that's just never ever what I was like, and it's never like, I still am not like that. But it was clear that I was different. Like people just love to hang on to that in school, especially like you just love to like focus on that thing that makes you different. I don't know if it's different now as people like, I mean, I can't say that Anoka has changed in that way. Like, I don't even know if that teacher's still a teacher. It probably is. But, yeah, you just, like, it wasn't, like, a shitty time, like, every day. But it was still, like, there's clearly these things that I've, like, hung on to years after college. Or, I'm sorry, years after high school. Because it's, like, you don't realize that stuff. Maybe it's because I just didn't want to. And then when I was around people who, to actually say to me, like, that wasn't okay. Or like, you shouldn't have, like, why did that person make you watch Passion of the Christ? That's not okay. Like, that's weird to do. Like, it's not until you have people outside of that say that makes you think critically of like, oh, like, high school was kind of just about being Muslim, but then being okay with people making jokes, and then being scared when something like 9/11 happened or other attacks by Muslims or the war, like hoping that like you're not targeted for something because of who you are or because of what people who claim to be Muslim do. It's like a tricky balance to like have normalcy and then like still be thinking about all that stuff of like, oh, like people hate where I'm from. Like the reality, like knowing like, oh, people really hate where I'm from, and kind of trying to be like an ambassador to be like, not all people are like this. Like not all Muslims like hate America. Not all Muslims are going to like bomb somewhere. And that was like the reality of like the closed-mindedness there in school. Is like you actually had to try to say that. And like I had a friend who had told me like, honestly, if I had never known you, I would just like think everything on the news was true about like what I hear about you. And I think that's still the case for some people in some areas, but it's like, okay, I guess like if I got that one person, maybe they're it's kind of like what my mom did for that dinner. It's like, oh, like maybe they'll hang on to that. Yeah. Like, oh, not every Muslim's gonna like, not every Muslim hates America. Not every Muslim's like out to kill people.
Yeah. And hopefully, or I like to think too, is like, you know, you only know a tiny fraction of the people that you did that for. You know, how many people just knew you and just by that virtue, even if you weren't even good friends with them, was like, oh, maybe this is okay. Or at least gives them the idea, like, oh, maybe these people are okay.
It's like plants a seed. Yeah, and I mean, there are some friends from high school, one in particular that I'm still really close with, and we've even talked about that stuff of like, high school was weird, and like, these weird things happened. Like, that's not normal, or like, that super Christian person, like, she was kind of mean, and like, reflecting, like, as adults of how, like, I don't know what the word is, but how isolating it can be. It's just, it can be such an isolating experience if you have teachers that are saying like really inappropriate things, or you're not surrounded by people that are like look like you. But I don't think that, I mean, I pass as white, so there's like some people that can tell like, oh, like you're not white, or like you're, some people think I'm like Hispanic or Spanish, so it's like, oh, you're not from here. But most of the time I could just pass. So it's like knowing that I have the passing privilege, but also knowing that like they're not like me. Like I don't see anybody that looks like me in my school. It does shape who you are. Kind of like what we were talking about earlier. Like you can see yourself fitting into a place if you see others that look like you. But until you do that, you're going to feel kind of like you don't belong, or like you don't fit in. Yeah. Which is weird. Because, yeah, high school wasn't awful, but it's just like these things shape who you become and like how you look at like what you would want to do for your kids, and like what you would want to teach other kids of like inclusivity and like being equitable and like fair and kind. Yeah.
I did want to ask about dating in high school, and if that was a possibility for you, if it was something that you did.
No, absolutely not.
You couldn't go to football games. I still had to ask.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great question because it's such a normal thing, like in American culture, to like have boyfriends or to like go on dates.
Prom.
Yeah, prom is this huge thing. That was not the case for me, but it's also, I think it's two things. It's that like culturally you just don't date around. Like that's not an Arab Middle Eastern thing. It's, you don't do that. And that was my first point. It's like, it's not a thing to do. And second, I'm the only girl, youngest daughter. It was like, the idea would cross my mind, but there's no way that it would have happened. You know, it's like, yeah, there was no like option for it. I think because you don't like go on dates. You don't have a boyfriend. Like the idea is it's not a thing that exists. Maybe it's like also like my dad, where he came from in his upbringing too, like much more conservative. And just that's not in his realm of thinking. Even now it's like, what? Like dating is just, so it was a no-go.
Yeah.
Weird.
And maybe related to this, maybe not, but what role, you mentioned like being the only daughter. And so I'm wondering, what role did gender play either at school or at home? Or if there was like a different experience or similar experience, or
I think gender played a huge role. Very, like, the family structure was very much like patriarchal, so like I think I stumbled on that word, but you get it. As the youngest and as the girl, there's like not much say. You're gonna like listen to what your dad says. So I think like it had everything to do with my upbringing. And that's those are things that I'm still like working on now, of like your role as a woman or a man, or like still unpacking all that stuff that I learned as a kid that I'm like working on unlearning now, of like, oh, like you can still make your own decision and like have the right decision even if like a man doesn't approve or doesn't agree with you. But when I was younger, that wasn't an option. It was very much like, you're going to listen to what your dad said, and there's no question about it. And I think in school I probably had the same mindset, because that was what it was like at home, of like, no, you ask your mom, but like your dad usually ultimately has the say, like the end say, of like, he's the head of the house, he makes the decisions. Was
there a difference then between you and your brothers, how you and your brothers were treated?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's my alarm. Sorry.
It's okay.
All right. So, yes, the roles, like the treatment between my brothers and I was very clear. My brothers used to be able to go out with their friends, go to Minneapolis, like do all these things that I was not allowed to do. And when I was eventually allowed to, I could never really go out late. Like, it was so clear. It was a very, like, so unfair based on me being a woman. Yeah.
So then I'm wondering, to what extent did you accept or challenge that growing up? Or a mixture?
Yeah. I would try to challenge it, but I think it wasn't met with much, I didn't win. The thing I will say that I did that changed, or the thing that happened that is not common for women, is I shouldn't say like generally, but I moved away for college. Whereas initially I was driving every day. But eventually, I think maybe like 2 months in, I like had a meltdown because I was driving so much and it was really stressful. So my dad was like, yeah, like I see how stressed you are. I see how tired you are. So I did end up moving to campus. And I didn't move back home, which was very against cultural norms of like, you should stay, like keep living at home until you're married. And I have to say that's still like something that my dad like is hurt by, like to this day. And I think that was my own way to like take hold and take control of that. Like, I am like a grown up, and just because I'm a woman, like it doesn't mean I can't like do what I want to or live independently. it is challenging. Like, even as a 28-year-old, being faced with that, like, guilt and, like, shame. I mean, there's lots of things with shame and guilt, and it's hard, and I think it'll be less hard eventually, but knowing that it, like, I know I made the right decision, like, recognizing you're not a bad person just because you didn't move back home, you know, but still being like, okay, like, this isn't a normal thing, and it's not going to be a normal thing for my dad. I mean, my mom is like, fine, she's over it, she's like, whatever, like, live your life, but my dad is like, you never moved back home, you know, like, and is really hurt by that. So it still plays a role, for sure, like, still right now plays a role, but it's just a matter of now, how am I willing, like, what am I willing to do to, like, take a lead on that and say, like, put it onto my terms instead of somebody else's terms. It takes a lot of practice, and it's exhausting. Definitely, like, don't have it down, but it is, like, I have the tools now to use, you know, I'm older, and, like, I have more of a say, and I can explain myself better. But knowing that, like, my dad's old and he's not going to change his mind about a lot of things, and coming to terms with that, like, for a man who, like, got his life taken away, like, a few times, and, like, trying to hang on, like, goes back to that, like, hanging on to where you're from, and, like, hanging on to your religion, and there's only one way to do that to him, or for him in his eyes. But yeah, I mean, it totally plays a role in it. It did then, and it does now still.
So you identify with being Muslim and Palestinian. So growing up in school, did you experience those identities as one and the same? Or have you experienced, are there times when you've experienced one without the other?
Yeah. I think that when I was in school, I really only identified, or I just, like, yeah, I only had the Muslim part. And I think now, like, learning more and just, like, being proud of where you're from and wanting your culture to stay alive, and, like, where you're from is important, and it's where your roots are. And yeah, when I was in school, it just wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't as important as it is now, because I think maybe I just had the capacity to be like, I'm Muslim, like, Middle Eastern, not Pakistani, not Indian, not, you know, like, I'm from the Middle East, and that's how I identified, is like, I'm like from the Middle East. I think it's still hard, or it was hard then to, like, say, yeah, I'm, like, Muslim, not white, even though I look white, and having to, like, that was probably more of the like, wait, like, we're not white. My parents are darker than I am. My siblings and I pass as white, I mean, in most cases. But there are people who are also Palestinian that are, like, way darker, and, like, you wouldn't call them white. So it's, like, this weird identity of, like, yeah, I'm Muslim, I look like you, but I know there's differences. Now it's, like, I'm a Palestinian Muslim, and I hold those two very close together and tightly. I think even more so when, like, tragic things happen, like the New Zealand shooting was, like, you hold those things even closer to you. To protect them and to, like, share positivity, like, positive stories, or just give people different outlooks. So, yeah.
So you said you're Palestinian Muslim. Does American fit somewhere?
Yeah.
Where does it fit in that?
Honestly, I wish it didn't have such a big place between the three, but it just does, because I've been here. This is all I know. So, like, I'm an American for so many reasons, and, like, in so many ways. And I also am trying to find ways to, like, incorporate my Palestinian identity and honestly try to put it above American. But it doesn't happen that way, because I'm not surrounded by Palestinians all the time as I'm surrounded by Americans all the time.
Sure,
So,
sure.
and like, it's, yeah, I am proud that I like have my Palestinian identity. I'm like very proud to be a Palestinian. I, like, it's so close to my heart. I'm like, yeah, I'm like an American, but I don't see it in the same light at all as I see being a Palestinian. Being a Palestinian in my heart comes first because I truly feel like there are roots and like there's history to that. And it's special. And I think part of the reason is like the story of my dad losing his home. Like that passes on to your kids. And like, I think my parents have done a beautiful job of sharing our like story of coming here. So I just hold those things so tight. And so it's like the Americanness is embedded, but I hold being Palestinian higher than I hold being an American. Not saying I like don't like the privileges that comes with like being a citizen, because I just became a citizen like 3 years ago last March, or 3 years ago in March, yeah. So it's a new thing, and I kind of don't believe it. And I still don't really believe I have like the protection that you get with being a citizen. But that's because I was, didn't have it for years and years and couldn't work until I had a green card and had to go through all these loopholes. And so like doesn't feel real. It's like cool that I have my citizenship. It's a privilege that I had like a lawyer and like assistance and a car to get to all these places and appointments. But yeah, I think the Palestinian identity like is like dear to my heart, and it's important to like share it with people. So like I cook Palestinian meals when I can and like try to share them with people, and because like you surround yourself, I surround myself with open-minded people and like people who would never like, I would never do this, like I would never be around people who didn't accept me. But it's still fun to be like, this is the Palestinian meal, and share it with other people and like share your experiences or whatever.
Okay. You just said something about being a citizen. Did that weigh on your mind growing up?
It did, because I couldn't work till I was 20. Excuse me. I like couldn't have a job. I couldn't like make my own money because this is like the worst term to like call a person, but I was an alien. I had an alien ID, so it weighed on me in like knowing that we weren't citizens. Like nobody in my family but my one brother was a citizen, and as long as I can remember, my parents were working on it, and like we were supposed to become citizens like 5 years after we were in the States, and then it was 7. And then September 11th happened, and then that was like, oh, like Muslims are terrifying. We're not going to give them like citizenship. And on top of that, like being, like having a Syrian passport for a Palestinian refugee, it's hard to like, where are you from? You're like not from anywhere, because Palestine's not identified as a country. You're not a citizen of Syria. You're not a citizen of Kuwait. So that was always like, pretty constantly, like I was aware of it all the time. But I also was like, yeah, like we have a lawyer, or like somebody's working on it, or like, okay, I can't have a job, but at least if like I can't have a job, but it's better than like applying for a job and then like being kicked out of America because you don't have like your alien card, So yeah, it was like pretty constant all the time. And even now it still is, because it's like, what? It took me 25 years to become a citizen, and it initially was only going to take me 5.
Yeah.
So same for my parents. They became citizens, or they got their green cards or citizenship when I was 20, because that's why I could start working, is because I got a green card. So just 8 years they've been citizens. It's not long.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
A couple times we've kind of like touched on 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
and I just like want to give the opportunity if you want to like talk about like anything specific like around that time, because you're old enough to like remember that, or like any like lasting effects. Obviously things have gotten more complicated, but in a lot of the research there's a lot of 9/11 is kind of a catalyzing it's not catalyzing, but it brings together a lot of Muslim experience, but then a lot of research started coming out of that big event.
Yeah.
And the reactions, I guess.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give you time to talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, I forget, like, me and friends were talking about, like, why, like, when we found out about 9/11 and, like, how, like, was it appropriate or inappropriate that it was playing, like, it was in 6th grade, and I was in 6th grade, and they, like, I remember somebody that worked in the lunchroom, like, was running around class to class saying, like, they attacked the Twin Towers or something. And the class is like, what are you talking about? Like, what's going on? And the teacher just, like, put on the news. So, like, they were, like, telling everybody. And I don't know if I don't think we watched it for the rest of the day, but I remember, like, watching it, and it was, like, 9 a.m. or whatever. Their time 9, so I think it was, like, our homeroom or something. And I just remember going home and my mom being terrified because it was Muslims, they were Muslims who did the attacks. And just the, like, fear and concern of, like, being Muslim and in that time. It was so unsafe. Like, women weren't wearing their hijabs, and, like, people were getting attacked and killed. So I think it always, like, that shaped me to, like, actually have fear or be fearful because of, like, being Muslim, because now there was, like, this really big reason why you should hate Muslims. And, like, a legitimate, like, oh, they killed a bunch of people. And this, it's so easy to hate a group. Like, it's so easy to hate the other. And, I mean, when the shooting in Texas happened on the military base, I think, and, like, the various other attacks, I mean, every time, I don't think, for as long as I live, I don't think I'll ever not have, like, a panicked reaction and, like, fear. Because, like, 9/11 was terrifying. It was, like, tragic. It ruined, like, the innocence of, like, school. Like, it ruined, it like, shaped your, like, I don't know how to say it. It was, like, being Muslim existing, but then being Muslim after this, like, terrible attack happened, and feeling like at any moment you could be targeted. At any moment you can, like, get hurt, or somebody can say something really painful and mean. And I mean, even now, like, honestly, one of, like, my truest nightmare is, like, being attacked in a mosque, because that's, like, the most sacred and peaceful place. But just worrying about, like, oh my God, like, my dad has an accent. Like, I hope that, like, when my brother's at Friday prayer, nothing happens to him, or, like, what if I'm wearing this necklace and somebody's angry and, like, does something. So it, like, shapes how you think of it. And I'm not the only one. Like, this is totally not, like, a random thing. But I think about it all the time. Like, I think about 9/11 all the time, and, like, if that didn't happen, where would we be, like, as a country in our, like, hate towards Muslims, and not even just Muslims. It's people who, like, Sikhs who have the long hair, and people always mistake them for being Muslim, and for just darker skinned people who are mistaken for Muslims, or like Indian, like people from India who are like attacked and murdered and people do it of like because they think you're Muslim or whatever. It's like it's always there. It's always there, constantly for me. And that's just, doesn't like eat away at me, but it's like a thing where I think of my nieces and nephews, and I'm like, oh, like, are they going to be ashamed? Are they going to be scared to be Muslim? What's their experience going to be? I don't know. It's just, yeah, it just changes you. Like, it was tragic, and then to be Muslim and have it happen and like kind of watch the world turn on you in a way is kind of haunting. Yeah.
Yeah, with good reason, I think.
Yeah.
I have a few more questions. So I couldn't figure out exactly how to word this question, but this is how I've got it so far. Did you ever experience negative personal reactions to your Muslim identity? So, for example, did you ever wish to hide it, or did you ever feel like restricted from it? So not like from the outside, but like internally, did you ever feel like opposed to your...
Yeah. I think that the first thing that comes to mind, like when I was younger, was like drinking alcohol. Because that's... because Muslims drink alcohol, but it's like in the religion you shouldn't. And I think when I was younger, really like hating that part of it, like I resented that part of the religion. It's like, why not? Like really, because like especially when like you're in high school and people are starting to drink or experimenting with alcohol or pot, and it's like, I guess for me it was more alcohol that people were smoking or were drinking. But yeah, like this internal battle of like, do I want to do this? Do I want to just like put this identity away for a second so I can like have this experience with people to like be normal? Yeah, that's like the biggest thing. Now it's like, whatever. I don't drink, and it's barely even because of religion at this point. I think now it's like, oh, I've seen it damage a lot of people. I've gone this long. I'm just like not going to. Now it's just like a personal choice. Not to say it's like, oh, sometimes I would love to like have a really nice glass of wine or like enjoy this beer that all my friends love. And then there's sometimes where I'm like, oh, I just wish that I could like put that little part of guilt away and just like do it. But yeah. I think like it's kind of like makes me think of like Catholic guilt. I don't really know exactly what that means completely, but it's like this like Muslim guilt. Like, oh, like just like I wish I could just like put that away for a second and enjoy this thing without feeling guilty. And like dating. Like, come on, like, just let me date. Or, like, why is it really that bad to just, like, date or to, like, meet people and, like, learn who you like or what type of person you like? And then the other thing is, like, being someone identifying as gay. Like, why is that wrong? But that's, like, I don't think when I was in high school and like around super Christian people, it was one thing, but then when you shape what you believe yourself, that was like kind of an internal thing, like, is it wrong? I don't think it's wrong. Like at my core, don't think it's wrong. And so that's just something where I've been like, it's not wrong. And God, like the relationship between you and whoever you believe or whatever you believe is like a personal thing. And nobody can like judge it or speak on it. And like my way of looking at it is like probably like more liberal leaning. I don't know that everybody would appreciate this, but of like, yeah, like God and I have a relationship. I don't necessarily do everything that like a proper Muslim should do. I know that. And I know that like nobody can define like what you believe. Nobody can judge what you have between whatever you believe. Whether it's like nature or like the beauty of flowers or animals, like nobody can like speak on that. So I think I have those internal battles of, especially like, I'm not going to go into this, but like dating somebody who's not Muslim, that like internal like, all right, well, I'm doing this and it's my own thing. And it's between me and God how he wants to like, God knows my intentions, nature knows your intentions. It's just like a very personal experience, and it doesn't need to be judged by others. So
yeah. On the kind of the other hand, what's the best or most impactful aspect of growing up Muslim?
I feel like the joy around like celebrating Ramadan and Eid, and like the Arab family gatherings, and like having those experiences as an adult, like those memories of those happy times, and creating those memories with my nieces and nephews is so special. It's so meaningful and special, and my parents did such a good job of making it an important thing. And yeah, I think the best part is just like what we have now and like what we're able to teach like our young family members. Like the celebration, and like, yeah, fasting is super tiring, especially when it's in the summer, and like I'm super grouchy because I don't have any water or coffee, but then you like eat, and then my mom makes this like really beautiful meal and we share it, and then we're all tired. It's like it's like beautiful and like fills my heart with joy and like a sense of community, even just within my own family, of like this special thing that we have, that we're celebrating on our own, but also with millions of other people like simultaneously. It's beautiful to have that, and I'm really thankful for that, and to be proud. I think like they really did teach us to be proud. My parents did. Like proud of being Muslim. I'll say for myself, like I'm proud of being Muslim. I'm proud of being where I'm from, and I'm proud of what my family represents. And I also know better than like, I know that like when you're identifying as Muslim, but then you do an evil act, like you're not actually a Muslim. That's not what the religion is. The religion is peace, and that's a beautiful thing. Like it is a peaceful religion, and it's so easy to forget that. Where like literally translates to peace. Islam is peace, and like it's just a nice thing to carry and to try to tell people. All religion has like, they're really like, that's not cool. Like that's not a great like way to see things or to talk of people. But you can hang on to the things that you appreciate and agree with. I think for me, they really did teach me of like pulling me back to my roots of like, I'm not the best practicing Muslim. Like I will absolutely admit that. And I still hold it close and appreciate it, and like have a lot to learn still. So, yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Thanks.
Okay, so I want to wrap it up by just asking if there's anything you wish, like in your schooling and growing up, that your teachers and peers would have known about you and your religion. And you can take it either looking into the past or like looking towards the future. Like, is there anything that educators should know about their Muslim students?
Yeah. I feel like one thing that I wish that was different, like from my school experience, was making sure that students didn't feel like they needed to forget their like native language, and encouraging you to still use that and not have to wash it away. And I don't know, like, the best way to do this of, like, teaching people to be inclusive, or, like, it's so hard to say, like, how people should do it, but I just wish that it was more of an inclusive environment for me and for my brothers in school. Because it was just like this mystical thing that nobody wanted to touch on. And I think that would have made a really big difference if there was enough resources and enough time for teachers, or for them to bring people in just to educate everybody. I think that would make such a big difference, to not make people feel othered or make them feel like they don't fit in. And I think even now it's so important. Like, I guess in the cities too, it's easier to say, like, you get a lot of people from different backgrounds, I guess, in certain schools, but it's like more in your face than it is like in a suburban area, in some suburban areas. I just wish that it was like, I just wish they thought more about what they were doing, because it really does, like, impact your life, you know? Yeah. But how did they know? I don't know. How would they know to do that when it's such a small population? Part of me is like, I can't blame them. And another part is like, why is that teacher saying that stuff? You know?
Right.
But, yeah.
Well, hopefully, your story being added to the Minnesota Muslim stories that we're gathering is at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Excited to add this to the collection.
Thanks.